The village courtyard was alive with music and celebration. The sun shone brightly, reflecting off colorful fabrics and shining beads. Drums echoed through the air, punctuated by the laughter and clapping of villagers. Women danced gracefully, twirling and stomping to the rhythm of the drums, while children ran around with excitement. The bride walked carefully toward the prince, her heart a mixture of calm and anticipation. Every eye in the village was on her, every cheer and clap meant to honor her union with the young prince. It seemed like a perfect day. But among the crowd, hidden in the shadows of the cheering villagers, stood an old woman. Her face was lined with years, her eyes sharp and calculating, yet tinged with sorrow. She pushed her way through the crowd with surprising agility for her age and leaned close to the bride. Whispering into her ear, she said words so faint, so urgent, that only the bride could hear. Suddenly, the bride's face went pale. Her knees buckled. She collapsed to the ground. Gasps echoed across the courtyard. The drums stopped abruptly. The celebration froze. Villagers turned toward her, whispering and pointing. Soldiers rushed forward, ready to intervene, while the prince stepped forward, stunned and alarmed. Then the old woman's voice rang out, loud and commanding, cutting through the confusion. "No! You cannot marry the king." The crowd recoiled. The soldiers hesitated. The king himself stepped forward, eyes narrowing, his hand raised to stop his men from carrying her away. "Stop," he commanded. "Why can't she marry me?" His voice echoed through the courtyard, tense and commanding. The old woman's gaze softened as she looked at the young bride, but her words were unwavering. "You do not know what you are stepping into. Fate has been waiting for you since the day you were born." For a moment, silence fell over the courtyard. The prince knelt beside the bride, unsure of what to do. The villagers whispered among themselves, fear and confusion spreading like wildfire. The king's face paled as he tried to comprehend the meaning behind the old woman's warning. And so, the story began to unfold, the story of a child, a prophecy, and a destiny that could not be avoided. Years ago, when this child was born, the chief priest, Nko, performed a sacred ritual that would change the course of her life forever. The cowries fell in a pattern that no one could ignore. The elders held their breath as the priest studied the arrangement, his face solemn, knowing the weight of what he was about to say. "The child's life is tied to blood," Nko said, his voice heavy with caution. "If she remains in the palace, the king will die. If she returns as a woman, she will bring forbidden union." The king's face turned pale. He could barely believe what he was hearing. Fear gripped him. To protect himself and his kingdom, he made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. The child was taken away from the palace, far from the lands she was born to rule. Every item connected to her birth, her cradle, her clothes, even the water she was bathed in, was removed from the palace, destroyed or hidden. The king believed that by doing this, he had avoided the prophecy. But fate cannot be erased. The child grew in a quiet, remote village. She laughed and played, learning the ways of her new home. She knew nothing of her royal blood, nothing of the destiny that hung over her life. She was loved, nurtured, and cared for, but even in the calm of her daily life, shadows of the prophecy followed her. She had dreams she could not explain, of a river, of a crown, of people she had never met. Sometimes she would wake up in a cold sweat, unsure if what she had seen was real or merely a dream. Back in the palace, the king tried to convince himself that the danger had passed. He told himself that by removing the child, the prophecy had been delayed, if not avoided entirely. But the chief priest, Nko, often reminded him that fate can be postponed, but never truly erased. One day, unknowingly, the king returned to the riverbank where the child's birth cloths had been discarded years ago. As he stepped on the wet stones, he slipped and fell. He struck his head and, in that instant, the prophecy seemed to have fulfilled itself. The child had not returned, and yet fate had claimed him. Guards rushed to his side, but there was nothing they could do. Nko simply watched, his face grave, knowing that the prophecy was one step closer to completion. Years later, the girl returned to the palace, now a young woman of extraordinary beauty and poise. She was unaware of the destiny that had followed her across the years. She walked into the courtyard, her steps graceful, her eyes calm, yet there was a spark in them that seemed almost familiar to the prince. He could not take his eyes off her, captivated by her presence. Something about her seemed both new and strangely known. The wedding day arrived, and the courtyard was filled with vibrant fabrics, flowers, and decorations. Drums played as villagers danced, celebrating what they thought was a joyous union. The bride approached the prince, her heart unaware of the storm that had been set in motion by events she could not yet comprehend. And then it happened, the old woman stepped forward. She could no longer remain silent. She leaned close to the bride and whispered the warning that would unravel the ceremony. "You cannot marry the king." The crowd froze. The soldiers moved forward to restrain her, but the king raised his hand, halting them. "Stop. Why can't she marry me?" he demanded. The old woman's gaze fell upon the bride, soft but resolute. "You do not know what you are about to step into," she said. "The prophecy has waited for you all these years. It cannot be ignored." The bride's mind raced. Memories, fragments she did not understand, began to surface, shadows of the river, whispers from her childhood, the echo of a voice she had never heard but somehow remembered. She collapsed, fainting at the center of the courtyard. The prince knelt beside her, panic written on his face. The villagers whispered in shock. The king's expression changed from confusion to realization as he began to understand the prophecy that had haunted his kingdom for years. Nko, the chief priest, stepped forward, holding his staff. His eyes were solemn but calm. "The prophecy was never forgotten," he said. "Fate has returned, and it cannot be undone, only understood." The courtyard was silent. The drums were still. The wedding celebration had transformed into a moment of tense fear and awe. Everyone knew that some destinies cannot be delayed, they can only be faced. The bride slowly opened her eyes, her gaze meeting the prince's. In that moment, she understood that her life, and the lives of those around her, would never be the same. The old woman watched, her purpose fulfilled, while Nko remained vigilant, knowing that the prophecy's final chapters had yet to unfold. And so, in the courtyard, the bride, the prince, the old woman, and the chief priest stood, frozen in time. Fate had returned to claim what it had long ago foretold. The story was far from over. The prophecy's next chapter was waiting to be written. The courtyard was frozen in shock, but before we reveal the truth of the prophecy, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more thrilling stories. Turn on notifications so you don't miss what happens next.